Is Donald Trump a sniveling coward? Well, based on new reporting from the New York Times and the Washington Post, the answer to that question would seem to be a definitive yes. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on August 11th, 2026. Today, I'm going to discuss the extraordinary lengths to which the Donald is going to avoid an alleged plot by the Iranian regime to assassinate him. And we will also update you on latest developments in the Bab al-Mandeb and Hormuz Straits and the impact that these developments is having on the global oil markets. Before we begin, please remember to like and share this video if you find it to be informative. And if you're not already a subscriber to Reason to Resist, please do become one and help us to reach our goal of 200,000 subscribers before the end of this month. So with that, let's get into it, and we'll begin with the report from the New York Times. You can see this article published today, actually published yesterday, updated today. Headline, Trump said to have secretly used military jet to leave Turkey amid threats. And the article goes on to explain, citing two senior U.S. officials, that top administration officials engaged in an elaborate deception to spirit President Trump out of Turkey during the NATO summit there last month, transporting, I'm sorry, I laugh when I try to imagine this in my mind, transporting the Donald in a catering container to a military jet because of a threat against him in Air Force One from Iran. Of course, whether there was any such threat is another matter altogether. This could have been a figment of their imagination, or maybe there was something to it. After all, the Iranian people and their government have every justification to want to wipe Donald off the face of the earth. The article goes on and says, Mr. Trump and other officials had said publicly that he would be leaving Turkey on July 8th aboard one of the older versions of Air Force One, rather than a luxury 747-8 donated by Qatar that he had flown in on. So apparently Donald Trump travels with two Air Force Ones when he goes abroad, maybe more than two, who knows. In any case, the article states, according to these two officials, that Trump told reporters at the time that he was making the switch for old time's sake. He comes up with some mighty witty explanations for his bizarre behavior, doesn't he? The article continues, Mr. Trump boarded the older plane from the left side door in view of cameras, and news organizations, including the New York Times, reported that he had traveled on it to Britain, where he switched back to the newer plane. So apparently the luxurious gift from the Qataris accompanied the older version of Air Force One from Turkey to Britain, and then the switch was made. And in the final paragraph here, it says, but instead of flying out aboard that older powder blue modified 747, Mr. Trump was whisked off that plane via a catering container that had been lifted to the opposite side of the plane from where the journalist traveling with him boarded, one of the U.S. officials said. The president was then taken to a third plane, which he flew in secret to Britain. The official with knowledge of the matter said, it looks like half the U.S. Air Force was engaged in trying to get the orange lunatic from Turkey to Britain in one piece. And here is a similar report from the Washington Post, also published yesterday. Contradicting public statements, Trump took secret flight from Turkey amid Iranian threat. And then the article, which is based on a U.S. official familiar with the operation and another person with knowledge of the president's travel. So there's at least two sources here. It was carried out unbeknownst to journalists, and some White House staff members, even staff members, believed they were on the same plane as the president, according to material reviewed by the Post. So it's not just, they were not just relying on two or verbal statements of two officials. They also have apparently reviewed some material. Maybe it's photographs, maybe it's videos, maybe it's some kind of classified cable, who knows. In any case, the Post goes on, says, the administration has claimed that Trump departed Turkey on July 8th on the former Air Force One. Trump announced on social media that he would use the former Air Force One rather than the plane that flew him there, a newer Boeing, blah, blah, blah. The security of the Qatar-provided aircraft has been called into question, and Trump said last month after the trip that he would undergo additional upgrades. In Ankara, Trump boarded the old Air Force One jumbo jet in view of television cameras. He was secretly shuttled minutes later to a smaller plane, an Air Force C-32A. I guess they don't have golden toilets on that one. or maybe they do, judging from the obscene cost of these pieces of military hardware. In any case, they used a catering truck to spirit him off of the Air Force One onto this military plane. An interesting question here is, what is the motive of these people who are going to, presumably it's the same people who have gone to the two papers of record in the United States, the Washington Post, New York Times, to reveal this. Certainly it doesn't make Trump look good. Maybe their goal was to try to make Iran seem like an even more dire threat. But if that was their objective, in the process, they have managed to make Donald Trump look like a sniveling coward. And then when you add this news to the Washington Post and New York Times pieces, it only gets worse for the Donald. It appears there are multiple reports on the media that when Donald Trump was playing golf recently, they had an Avenger surface-to-air missile system protecting him. It was following him around the golf course. Now, I don't know. I think that's the Avenger there in the upper right-hand corner. I can assure you, and I don't need to be a world-class weapons expert to say this, that sucker isn't going to be able to take down a ballistic missile. Not that Iran has one that is capable of reaching the United States, at least at this stage. But you'd need something considerably more powerful and sophisticated than that little puppy to take down a ballistic missile. And it may be that wouldn't even be able to handle a sophisticated drone. Who knows? But apparently it makes Donald feel more relaxed when he's out on the golf course, contributing to the destruction of the world. So it's quite interesting and instructive to compare this behavior on the part of the president of the world's most powerful country to that of senior Iranian officials during the time that the child-murdering Trump and Netanyahu regimes were mass murdering their top leadership. And I'm referring here, of course, to the fact that back in March, during the hottest phase of this hot war, only days after the Americans and/or Israelis slaughtered the martyred supreme leader of Iran, Imam Ali Khamenei, and his daughter and his 14-month-old granddaughter, only days after that, during a pro-Palestine protest, I believe this was the Al-Quds march in Tehran, they went out into the streets and publicly unveiled themselves, made themselves readily available to the child-murdering Israeli and U.S. regimes. And here is a report at the time, published at the time by the Washington Examiner about this, which is hardly a media outlet that is sympathetic to Iran, let me assure you.
Multiple high-ranking leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran, including the president, walked about the streets of Tehran for a pro-Palestinian rally before explosions erupted at the event. Supreme National Security Council Secretary Ali Larijani blamed the explosion on the United States. He told state media, quote, "As American pressure grows, the nation's determination will strengthen." The origin of the explosion and the casualties of the attack are not yet known, but no high-ranking officials have been reported as harmed.
Now, I just want to point out, you see right here, you can see smoke billowing from the top of a building there in the center upper part of this image. I was in Iran in the second half of March. I arrived in Tehran a few days after this attack and visited the site of the attack, right what you're seeing there on the screen. And I was shown by members of the state media the blood of a woman who was killed by shrapnel from that criminal attack while she was on the street protesting in support of the Palestinian people who are being subjected to a US-backed genocide in occupied Palestine, of course. She was murdered on that day. This very event, there were senior elite leaders of Iran, as the Washington Examiner and others reported at the time. And one of those officials you just heard was Ali Larijani. You can see him here. He was out in the street venting his indignation at the criminal behavior of the Trump regime. Again, this is just days after they had murdered the Americans and the Israelis, the supreme leader of Iran, his daughter, and his granddaughter. Now, what happened to Mr. Larijani? Well, a few days later, he was assassinated by the child-murdering Israelis and Americans. This is a report from March 18th, 2025, and you can see that he was blown to bits by what was purportedly an Israeli airstrike on a house where he had taken refuge with his son. So presumably, the child murderers also killed his son. They seem to specialize in wiping out entire families associated with resistance. So this man undoubtedly knew, a national security advisor, the risks that he was taking, not simply by going out into the street, but simply by serving in that capacity. When you're up against an enemy like the United States, like Israel, with the unscrupulousness, the ruthlessness of that enemy, and the destructive capabilities of that enemy, merely serving in a position of power and influence in a government or an organization that is resisting U.S. and Israeli hegemony in the region is a life-threatening undertaking, as has been demonstrated again and again. And this may explain why today there are so many people in Iran, as I think we showed convincingly when we covered the funeral of the martyred Supreme Leader. Tens of millions of Iranians came out to support the slain constitutional leader of the Islamic Republic, the martyr Imam Ali Khamenei. And they did that not only when it was extremely hot outside, but also when the United States was bombing their country. For the latter half of that 7-day funeral program, the United States had resumed the bombing of Iran. So I can hardly think, as I argued at the time, of a more convincing demonstration of one's support for a government than coming out in those conditions and mourning the killing of your leader and also demanding revenge. So it also, I think, is instructive to look at the approval ratings of these mass murderers who rule us in the West. You know, Trump's approval rating at this point is down to about 33%. It's certainly far less than a majority of Americans. And that's with extremely pro-Trump coverage from a very large and influential media organization like Fox News. And there are others who are supportive of Trump. And then you have, you know, people like Emmanuel Macron, who has an approval rating, I think, down around 12%. The French president, Friedrich Merz, the chancellor of Germany, the Nazi, his approval rating is also in the gutter, down around Macron levels. Starmer resigned, the British prime minister, even though he had a majority in the British parliament. He didn't even last 2 years in the job because he was so deeply unpopular. So whether you agree or disagree with the politics of the Iranian government, I think it's quite clear that these leaders are far more courageous than the current crop of leaders in the West. And that may explain why apparently a very substantial, or at least help to explain why a very substantial proportion of the Iranian population supports these individuals. So with that, let's turn then to developments on the battlefield. I reported yesterday that there had been another attack on the massive Jazan oil refinery in southwestern Saudi Arabia near the border of Yemen. And at the time that I reported that yesterday, I was not aware that the Yemeni government in Sana'a, the Ansar Allah government, had in fact claimed responsibility for the attack in Jazan. It was my understanding that no one had yet claimed responsibility, but they have since, or perhaps just before I did my report, the Ansar Allah government have stated that they were in fact responsible for a drone strike on the Jazan facility over the weekend. And as you can see here, the oil industry media are reporting that the gigantic Saudi oil company, Aramco, has delayed the opening of that refinery to August 30th. This is a 400,000 barrel per day refinery. So it's very important to the refinement of petroleum products. I think particularly to the production of diesel. And you'll see that according to this article, what they refer to as the Houthi militants, the correct way to describe the government in Sana'a is Ansar Allah. They said on Sunday, this past Sunday, that they had attacked the refinery, which had been shut down on July 27th, and it was previously planned to restart on August 15th. So they've delayed at a time, as I'm going to explain, when there is a severe shortage in the world of refined products, and particularly diesel, they delayed the opening of this by 2 weeks, and they may well be able to delay it again with another drone strike, which I'm sure they're eminently capable of doing. And again, this just goes to drive home the vulnerability of the Saudi and other Gulf Arab oil infrastructure to attacks not only by Iran, but also other resistance forces, including Ansar Allah in the region. Now, another point I should make about this is, so there's been an official confirmation that Ansar Allah attacked a Saudi refinery, a major Saudi refinery on Sunday. Well, only a few days earlier, as we discussed in our last two reports, the governments of Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia entered into a military alliance, and they said at the time they entered into it last week that it provided for mutual defense. So if one of the parties was attacked, the other parties would regard that as an attack upon them. Well, Saudi Arabia was attacked. What are the Turkish and Pakistani governments going to do about it? Maybe something, but at this stage, there's no indication they're going to do anything. Rather, they're talking about Egypt joining their performative military alliance. Again, I'm not saying that there is no prospect that they'll take action. I hope they don't. The last thing we need is an expansion of this war to include Turkey and Pakistan. And there is overwhelming opposition in both countries, thankfully, to their governments becoming involved in this war, particularly on the side of the United States and Israel. And I think at the end of the day, that will restrain them. But it does raise a question. What are they actually trying to accomplish with this military alliance if they're not going to do anything in response to this attack by Ansar Allah? My interpretation thus far is that this is what I would call deterrence kabuki theater. They're trying to create the impression that they'll act collectively against any attack on Saudi Arabia in order to deter those attacks. But at the end of the day, they are not willing, I believe and would hope, to drag their countries into this criminal war of aggression on Iran. Now, relatedly, there has been yet another Saudi ship struck in the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. This is a report from today. Yemeni government-affiliated media reported today that 3 crew members had been killed in a Houthi attack on a ship in the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. Tragically, this is the first time that crew members have been killed in an attack by Ansar Allah on a ship in the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. Al-Jumhuriya TV reported that a strike by the Ansar Allah movement on a ship killed 2 Pakistani nationals and 1 Indonesian national. While the outlet did not identify the ship that was struck, Iran's ISNA news agency reported that it was a Saudi vessel. The report said the ship was hit by a missile. Under the current circumstances, it is the height of folly and irresponsibility for the Saudis to be directing or causing or inducing ships affiliated with Saudi Arabia to go through the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. It has been demonstrated conclusively that these ships are highly vulnerable. Ansar Allah has made very clear their intentions, and they've also given an out to the Saudi autocracy, a way to get out of this war in the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, and that is to lift the criminal and inhumane blockade on Yemen, which has been in place for over a decade and caused at this stage probably hundreds of thousands of innocent Yemenis to die. All of this could be avoided if the Saudis lifted the criminal blockade, but they refuse to do that, and in fact continue to send vessels, or at least some, in the Bab al-Mandeb Strait when there are lethal risks to the passengers, the crew members of those vessels. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, there is a serious supply problem in the diesel fuel markets. Here is a report published today on oilprice.com by the ever insightful Irina Slav. I've cited her work before. The title, Global Diesel Crunch Worsens Ahead of Peak Winter Demand. And she writes that as peace in the Persian Gulf remains elusive and Ukrainian drones keep raining on Russian refineries, yes, the Ukrainians are doing their best to contribute, by the way, to this diesel fuel crisis. She says a global fuel crisis is looming larger by the day as demand is set to increase in the coming months, especially for diesel. Shortages are already reality in some parts of the world. In Southeast Asia, Reuters reported last week palm oil farmers are seeing diesel supply shortages and spiking prices. In the US, diesel fuel exports hit an all-time high in the first week of August, running at an average daily rate of 1.9 million barrels. Meanwhile, Russia, the world's number 2 diesel exporter, has banned exports in order to deal with the local supply squeeze caused by Ukrainian drone attacks on refineries. So yes, US refiners are making a killing, but she goes on to say the situation is quite far from perfect for large fuel importers such as the European Union, because it is now facing new competitors such as Brazil and Turkey, which previously took in a lot of Russian diesel fuel. Still, with that gone, they have to compete with US barrels as supply from the other big refining hub in the Middle East remains severely disrupted. And she goes on and says Europe, she's quoting here Eugene Lindell, head of refined products at consultancy FGE Nexent ECA, saying to Bloomberg, quote, Europe has a tremendous diesel problem. It will get ugly in the sense that you will probably see extremely high flat prices. These high prices will spread to everything from consumer goods to services, and according to Lindell, translate into pressure on political circles. Then she quotes Rabobank senior energy strategist Joe DeLora, who said, we're in a diesel supply crunch right now because none of the Persian Gulf refineries can get product out. Crude oil is just the input, but diesel is the everything the industrial economy runs on, he said. Everything in agriculture, everything in construction, everything in mining. Also, everything on the supply and distribution side runs on diesel. Big oil majors have also been sounding the alarm on a supply squeeze in fuels that is a lot more serious than the squeeze in crude oil. But it has led to nothing but an attack on the industry by President Trump, who told Exxon and Chevron they were making too much money and had to pass some of it on to consumers. Well, they are making too much money, but the fact of the matter is this is going to get worse in any event. And she goes on to write that those record diesel exports are costing the United States. These have been running at rates of 1.5 million barrels daily for 5 weeks in a row before rising to the record high, according to Bloomberg. Because refineries cannot produce more diesel at the moment, fuel sellers have been dipping into inventories. As a result, these are now at the lowest since 1996, Bloomberg reported, with peak demand season right around the corner and refinery maintenance season even closer. So look out, folks. This extremely important fuel is going to be in increasingly short supply as demand increases in the next several months. Now, in these rather desperate circumstances, there's some interesting news from the Wall Street Journal about the attitude of the Gulf refineries, the Gulf oil producers, to the demands of Iran that it maintain control over the Strait of Hormuz and that it be free to charge fees for passage through the Strait of Hormuz. The Wall Street Journal just reported that Gulf states are accepting a new normal in Hormuz. Iran is in control. And according to the journal, Persian Gulf energy producers are concluding that Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz will become permanent, disrupting their oil and gas exports and global energy supplies indefinitely. The problem is they worry the alternative, going back to war, would be worse. The conundrum highlights how the war has unleashed a more antagonistic Iran and left a region that is vital to the world's energy security with no good option for countering it. You know things are bad when the Wall Street Journal is willing to be this grim in its assessment of the situation. The journal continues, Iran's rivals in the Gulf don't like the deal now under consideration to crack open the vital waterway that formalizes Iranian oversight of inbound ships. But Gulf officials said the region sees the agreement as preferable to further military action between the US and Iran, which would put Arab states' energy infrastructure at risk. So the interesting question is going to be this. Even if the Gulf autocracies agree to Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, and even if they accept the payment of a fee, which is from the Iranian perspective satisfactory, is Iran in that event going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to pre-war levels? I think that's an open question because, okay, on the one hand, if it reopens the Strait of Hormuz fully while having the authority to impose fees, Iran will be able to reap tens of billions of dollars a year in revenue, much needed revenue, and which in part would undoubtedly be used to strengthen its military even further, but I'm sure much of it would also be used to improve the lives of Iranians who have been suffering under this maximum pressure sanctions regime inflicted by the West criminally, not to mention the hot war. So that would be the advantage of opening up the Strait of Hormuz. But on the other hand, if they opened up the Strait of Hormuz and alleviated pressure on the American economy, what would stop the Americans after the price of oil drops and these supply problems have been rectified in the oil products markets? What would stop the American government from coming back and attacking Iran again? Isn't it going to be necessary, in order to deter the United States from doing this, to inflict severe pain on the US economy? Wouldn't it make more sense for the Iranians to say, even though the oil shippers have agreed to pay this fee, we're still not going to open up the Strait of Hormuz until the United States complies with all the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding, like unfreezing all of our stolen assets, lifting all of the sanctions, forcing the Israelis out of Lebanon and the Gaza Strip, and forcing the Saudis to lift the blockade on Yemen. It may well be that even if you have in place a deal with all of the major players in the Persian Gulf for the Iranians to take fees, that the Iranians are still going to insist on severely restricting traffic through the Strait of Hormuz to deter further attacks by the United States and to secure other concessions from the criminal Trump regime. So again, all of this points to a prolonged closure of both the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, with severe economic consequences mounting by the day. Now, it's in this desperate environment that the Pakistani defense minister, a minister of a government that is truly sycophantically committed to the Trump regime, came out today with an entirely bogus claim that the United States and Iran were on the verge of some sort of an arrangement. This is an article in the Jerusalem Post from today. It has been echoed, this report, in other media outlets. And what that arrangement might look like, only the defense minister knows, because it is a figment of his imagination. There's absolutely no evidence that the Iranians and the Americans are even having meaningful negotiations, let alone, being on the verge of some sort of an arrangement. So the Iranian officials have been absolutely crystal clear that there is no direct negotiation going on. At most, they pass some messages through the mediator, but they've put a set of demands on the table which are completely unacceptable to the Trump regime, even though, in my view, they're completely reasonable. Like, the U.S. has to pay reparations, the U.S. has to return stolen assets, the U.S. has to lift all the sanctions, the U.S. has to get the child murdering Israelis out of Lebanon and Gaza, and on and on. So the U.S. is nowhere near the point of accepting those concessions. It may one day have to do so. I believe it will, but it's not there yet. And so this is obviously a feeble attempt to try to suppress the price of oil. I can only imagine that that was the intention of the defense minister of Pakistan, and he may have been put up to this by the United States government. But what's really interesting is how miserably this attempt to suppress the price of oil has failed. Here is the current report from oilprice.com. I took a screenshot of the price of oil about 30 minutes ago. So that would have been at around noon Eastern time today, August 11th. And you'll see that not only did the price of oil not go down within the hours after this report, it's actually gone up. It's gone up 1.35%. That's Brent crude. And Brent crude is now trading at almost $89. As I said several days ago, you can expect the price of oil to march up inexorably as the market comes to the sobering realization that Donald Trump has been lying all along about the prospects for peace. He doesn't want peace. And in that regard, and as a footnote, I have to say this. I hear in the alternative media people who are not at all supporters of this criminal war of aggression in Iran, sometimes say that the Iranian leadership no longer wants peace. I think that that is, even though it may be, stated with good intentions, I think that that is a misconception of the situation in Iran. I've been to Iran, as I've said many times to my audience, 3 times in the past 14 months, twice during bombardments of the country. Also there during the 7-day funeral program for the martyred Supreme Leader. I have met hundreds of Iranians from across the political spectrum. I have met government officials. I've met many members of the state media, just ordinary Iranians, people who are secular, people who are religiously conservative. I have yet to meet a single person who wants war with the United States or anybody else. They don't want war. I can assure you of that. Not the Iranian leadership, not the Iranian people, not the Iranian media. What they want is a permanent end to the war. And they've come to the realization that the only way to achieve a permanent end to the war is to inflict a price upon the United States that is so severe that it is deterred from attacking Iran in the future. So their goal is a permanent long-term peace. It isn't war, but they're willing to continue to wage war in opposition to the United States and Israel in order to achieve that goal of a long-term sustainable peace. That is the proper way to characterize it. And since I'm on the subject of some misconceptions, another misconception I think that we hear a lot about in the media is that Donald Trump is trapped. No, my friends, he's not trapped. He has a way out of this entire mess, an honorable way. And that is to go to the American people and to say, I screwed up. This was the wrong thing to do. And if he wants to blame the Israelis for it, he can do that. He can say, I trusted the Israeli intelligence and the Netanyahu government when they told me that the regime would be toppled. I made a mistake. This is going badly. I am going to bring an end to this now. The Iranians, if they want to charge a reasonable fee for passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, they can and should do so. They can, rebuild their country that way. It's up to, the shippers in the region whether or not they're willing to pay that. But I'm going to withdraw our forces from the region, protect our forces, and we're going to redirect all of that money that we have been committing to waging wars in West Asia to improving the lives of American citizens. I've learned from this experience. Even at my advanced age, I'm capable of learning from my mistakes. I apologize for this, but I promise you, from now on, I'm going to do better. He could say something like that, and if he followed through with it, I actually believe that he would probably become wildly popular. Not everybody would forgive him. There's some things that Donald Trump has done and probably will continue to do, for which a great many Americans will never forgive him. But he would win over a lot of hearts and minds if he actually just had the humility to admit that he fucked up royally, not just from a practical perspective, but from a moral and ethical and legal perspective, and that he's learned from the tragic mistakes of his second administration. So that is his way out, and it's an honorable way out, and it's a way out that would make the lives of everybody better all around the world. Donald Trump chooses not to take that out. So let's be very clear. He isn't trapped. He is free to do the right thing, but has elected to continue to pursue this satanic objective of imposing U.S. dominance on the region, no matter what the cost, including the physical extermination of children who happen to have the misfortune of being members of a population whose resources are coveted by Western elites. So please, my friends, let's stop saying that Donald Trump is trapped. Now, a couple of final news items I wanted to share with you. This one I thought brought a smile to my face. U.S. rights groups are suing the Trump regime over sanctions on the International Criminal Court. This is a report published today by Agence France Presse. Rights groups sue U.S. President Donald Trump over his sanctions targeting the International Criminal Court, saying the measures block victims of war crimes from pursuing justice. The Trump administration, which rejects the ICC's authority, has imposed travel bans and asset freezes on several judges and prosecutors just making their lives extremely difficult because they're assuming the responsibility of passing judgment on the satanic war criminal Netanyahu and the former Israeli defense minister Yoav Gallant. This is so disgraceful. In a New York court filing, 4 groups, including Human Rights Watch, say the sanctions should be struck down as they violate laws including First Amendment free speech protections. Indeed, that is what this is all about. It is about stifling the speech of the critics of Israel, not just about maintaining the impunity of the world's worst war criminals. And the court filing stated, this is an unlawful abuse of power constituting a frontal attack on the rule of law, the independence of judges, prosecutors, and lawyers, basic precepts undergirding the international legal order, and the principle of equal access to justice. The lawsuit states, the 101-page complaint claims the restrictions cause grave damage to the ability to bring justice to perpetrators of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Hear, hear. Couldn't agree more. I practiced law in the United States for a long time. In my judgment, although I haven't had the opportunity yet to read the complaint, this lawsuit stands a reasonably good prospect of success. I think much will turn on whether the plaintiffs in this proceeding get a judge who is truly committed to the rule of law, or is one of the less, shall we say, conscionable appointments of the Trump regime. Time will tell, but I feel good about this lawsuit. And finally, I wanted to share with you this doozy from Trump's Truth Social account published yesterday. I see that representatives of the Islamic Republic of Iran are asking for compensation for the damage done to them during the last 5-month military conflict, started because they will not have a nuclear weapon, even though it was never mentioned in any of our negotiations or meetings. That's a flagrant lie. They were saying this publicly for the last several months that they wanted reparations, publicly. But it is an interesting idea because now I am likewise demanding compensation from Iran for all of the people that they have killed and gravely wounded with their roadside bombs in many conflicts, blah, blah, blah. Well, Donald Trump and his regime have just distinguished themselves as the first perpetrators of genocide and crimes against humanity to have demanded compensation from their victims. Yet another inglorious distinction for the orange lunatic in the White House. That's my report today, my friends. We'll be back to you tomorrow when we expect to be interviewing the inestimable, wonderful Vijay Prashad, and we're going to be talking with Vijay about what has happened to the government of Venezuela. For now, I'm signing off from Montreal on August 11th, 2026.